Okay, everybody, we're excited today to have one of the most dynamic youth hockey players from Illinois ever, Topher Scott, join us on our Chicago. Playing hockey for the 1985 birth year Chicago Young Americans, considered by many to be the best U14 ever in the state of Illinois. Topher led that team to the 1999 Tier 1 National Championship game where they beat the Syracuse Stars 9-1 in the final. The 9-1 margin of victory is the largest margin of victory ever recorded in a USA Hockey National Championship game. In the fall of 2000, Topher moved on to be an inaugural member of the Chicago Steel in the USHL at 15 years old, where he played from 2000 to 2004 before heading to play hockey NCAA Division I at Cornell University. Topher played at Cornell from 2004 to 2008, where he was named as captain his junior year and senior year before heading to play professionally in the East Coast Hockey League and Central Hockey League from 2008 to 2010. Upon retiring from professional hockey, Topher headed to Miami of Ohio for one season as a graduate assistant coach before returning to his alma mater, Cornell, as an assistant coach from 2011 to 2016. At the end of the 2015 season, Topher left coaching in the NCAA to work as a culture consultant for several NCAA organizations, as well as a yearly presenter at the American Hockey Coaches Association annual conference. That conference is the largest gathering of NCAA and professional hockey minds in the United States each April. In addition to consulting, parents and coaches a place to go for a little bit of education, a little bit of inspiration regarding the greatest game on the planet. In January of 2020, Topher's vision for the hockey think tank expanded to youth hockey, with Topher partnering and rebranding the Syracuse Nationals Tier 1 organization to be renamed the Hockey Think Tank, with Topher leading the club as hockey director and U18 head coach. To say Topher has a tremendous knowledge of youth hockey, junior hockey, and professional hockey, both as a coach as well as a player, would be a huge understatement. And now that I'm finished pumping Toph's tires, I'll let him get started.
Thanks, Kent. Although you didn't mention my biggest claim to fame as being the nephew of one Timothy Scott. So that's probably the thing that I try to pump my tires the most about. But thank you everybody for taking the. What's that?
That'll be a whole nother week's episode.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody for taking the time on this Saturday to hang out with us a little bit and talk some hockey. And as Kent said, you know, I've spent the last 4 years or so. Basically, it's been a learning experience for me. I had the chance to, you know, do some pretty cool things in my career from a playing and coaching standpoint. But now that I've gotten more into, you know, the youth hockey game and more into not being a part of a team myself and being able to travel around a bunch of different colleges, a bunch of different pro teams, a bunch of different, you know, youth organizations. It's been a really cool learning experience. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to share my screen with you in just a second, has to do with, number one, my experience as a college and professional player and coach. And also I got my master's in sports studies at the University of Miami of Ohio as well. And I wrote my thesis on key and commonalities of really, really successful programs. So a lot of what I'll talk about has to do with that as well. And I'll get going and share my screen. And I think we're going to utilize the chat portion of this. If anybody has any questions as I'm going through this, feel free to use the chat. It's on the bottom of the, actually, you guys have been doing this. You probably know it already, but on the bottom. So if you have any questions, then shoot away. All right. Yeah, so this presentation, I call it Reach for Greatness. I'll talk a little bit about you know, getting there from an individual standpoint, but also from a team standpoint as well. So just a little bit about the presentation itself. Like I said, a lot of it has to do with my learning experiences, both as a player and a coach, but I absolutely love to read. And when I did my master's thesis on successful programs at Miami, um, the genesis of that was when I was still playing pro hockey. I knew I wanted to get into coaching at some point, so I started reading a lot of books about coaching. And as I'm 5 or 6 books in, reading the Pat Rileys and the John Woodens and the Bill Belichick's, I started to realize that, a lot of these books were saying the same things. Why are certain individuals successful, and why are certain teams and organizations successful as well? So that was the basis of my thesis. And then, I started reading a lot of books about other things as well, reading about business and entrepreneurship and the military and, self-help and well-being books and psychology books and all these kinds of stuff. And it was really interesting to see that a lot of what I found from a sports standpoint translated directly into a life standpoint as well. Both from individuals and from a team standpoint. So this is just a smattering of the books that I've read. A lot of people like to take pictures of this slide. Some of my favorites that I've read, there's one by Mike Krzyzewski, The Gold Standard. That's one of my favorites. The Power of Habits, a little bit more academic, a little more sciencey, but that's a great one as well. And then anything by John Wooden, I think is incredible. So. The basis of what I'm going to talk about here today is the 5 R's. And I think the 5 R's are what every successful and fulfilled, not just successful, because I think success is a relative term. It's relative to you. But a lot of really successful people and organizations have these 5 things in common. Number 1 is resiliency. I think it's the most important one. In a year or in a career, bad stuff's going to happen. It's inevitable. And so successful people in organizations, rather than looking to blame and looking to say, poor me, they look at the bad times as an opportunity to learn, grow. It's a challenge to get through. Number 2 is relationships. Successful people in organizations, they put a lot of time and value into relationships. People always say that, but the really successful ones, they actually act on it and have structures in place to be able to really put the effort into getting to know each other as a group. Number 3, relentless repetition. That's just a fancy way of saying hard work. Successful teams, successful people, they find a way to work harder, but not only harder, work smarter than everybody else. And I'll talk about that. 4, I talk about relishing the moment. It's very, very easy to get worried about stuff that hasn't happened yet in the future. It's very, very easy to beat yourself up about maybe some bad stuff that has happened in the past or mistakes that you've made. It's a lot harder, just from a human nature standpoint, to really have a focus on the here and now and really enjoy the here and now as well. But again, successful teams and organizations are able to see what's right in front of them and put their focus and their dedication into that. And then number 5 is reflection. I really believe that successful people and organizations, they take the time to take a step back and really think about the why of what they do. And we're going to go through all 5 of these things in a little bit more detail as we go through this presentation here. So the first thing I'll talk about is resiliency. Where victims see adversity, achievers see opportunity. Again, you want to be fulfilled in life. You want to be happy. You want to be successful. This is a huge, huge statement that I would encourage you to live by, because the bad stuff is going to happen. It's inevitable. Things don't always go our way in our careers. Things don't always go our way in a season if you're a team. And what happens is the achievers, they see it again, opportunity to learn, opportunity to grow, opportunity to have a challenge that you can get through, instead of what the easy thing to do is pretty much to point fingers and to blame and to have a little bit of a woe is me mentality. So everybody on this Zoom right now probably recognizes who this guy is. Theo Epstein is the GM of the Chicago Cubs. I am a diehard Chicago White Sox fan. So the fact that I'm going to say something nice about this guy is going to be very, very hard for me, but I will try and do my best. So Theo Epstein, I got to read his book, The Cubs Way, basically how they were able to take the perennial losers, which is what I loved, the Chicago Cubs, and taking them to a World Series champion in a span of about 5 years. And one of the biggest things that I remember from that book that I took out of it is when he took over as the GM of the Cubs, the first thing that he did was he took the scouting manual and he threw it away. And he brought in a new thing. And the biggest thing about their mentality when it came to scouting players was it was at the top of every single one of their scout sheets, the most important thing to them. What are 3 ways that this player has dealt with adversity on the field? And what are 3 ways that this person has dealt with adversity off the field? It wasn't bat speed. It wasn't, statistics, home runs, RBIs, batting average, whatever they talk about in baseball nowadays. I want to know what are 3 ways that this person has dealt with bad stuff on and off the field. And to me, I think that's such a profound thing. And you look at the way that they built their Cubs organization with guys like that. You look at an Anthony Rizzo who had to battle cancer to get back, and a John Lester, same thing. There's people within that organization that are riddled with people that have had to fight through. And it's amazing because you look at Major League Baseball. First of all, if you're one of the top hitters in the league, you're batting 300, and that's a top hitter in the league, which means you're failing 7 out of 10 times. It's just something in baseball. That mindset is really, really important. And then on the other side of things, if you're drafting guys, if you sign with the Cubs, there's not a chance you're playing in the major leagues right away. You're probably playing an A or AA ball in, Dubuque, Iowa, or South Bend, or wherever their farm team is, and sleeping on a mattress, making $100 a week. And you got to work your way up to get to Wrigley Field. And so they wanted people as a part of their organization that they knew had the mental fortitude that when things weren't going well and they got cut, that they would take it upon themselves to work and get to where they wanted to go. So I'm a big believer, and that's the reason why they were able to get from perennial losers to where they are now. And from reading Theo's book, I would encourage you guys to read this, especially if you're a Cubs fan. It was pretty cool. And then this is an incredible stat as well. Obviously, this is a hockey team and hockey people we're talking to. And if you look at this stat, you go back to the 16-17 Stanley Cup Finals when it was Nashville playing against Pittsburgh. And you look at the stat in the middle, 88% of the players that played in the NHL that year at some point in their career played in the AHL, right? So we think about the Crosbys, we think about the Malkins and players like that. At the end of the day, though, 9 out of 10 players playing at the highest level in the league spent time in the minor leagues. They were told that they weren't good enough. They got cut, and they were told, go ride a bus before you can get back here and play. You look at Nashville, 96% of their roster spent time and developed in the AHL. 92% of the Pittsburgh Penguins did that. So a lot of times we think about professional hockey specifically, and we think of the top end talent, and, it was easy to get there. It's not. 9 out of 10 people. So it just goes to show you that, talent is, yes, it's important, but having that fortitude to work through the tough stuff, that's pretty much a given that you have to be able to make it to the highest levels of hockey. So resiliency, how do you get that? For me, it's learned and earned by the decisions that you make in the good times and the bad. You can't just go to Target and buy it. You earn it by, again, like I said, how are you treating yourself? How are you choosing to look at situations, especially the tough ones when they happen? It's something that's learned, and it's something that's earned, made by those decisions every day. Get comfortable being in uncomfortable situations. You look at this from a player's standpoint. It's uncomfortable to get benched. It's uncomfortable when you get to the higher levels to maybe be a healthy scratch and have to sit in the stands. It's uncomfortable making mistakes during a game or during practice and being coached hard by your coach. But at the end of the day, those are things that are necessary if you have to get outside your comfort zone to be able to grow as a player, as a person, as a human being. From a team standpoint, it's uncomfortable when refs make bad calls. It's uncomfortable when the other team scores a goal in the first minute or two of the game. It's uncomfortable when, maybe you don't have the momentum during a game. But if you can rally with each other and really come together rather than point fingers, those are the qualities of successful teams. And I'll give you an example. A guy named Reed Cashman, who was an assistant coach with the Washington Capitals now. He used to be an assistant at Quinnipiac back when I was coaching at Cornell. And every year I'd make a point when teams won championships, I'd reach out to one of the coaches on the staff and say, hey, why? What was it about a certain group that led you guys to win? And so I was talking to Cash about it, and he said, Toph, I'll give you a perfect example. We're playing against Yale. The big crosstown rivals. Yale was really good at the time. And Cash goes, we go down 3-0 in the first 5 minutes of the game. So as coaches, what do? We call a timeout, try to rally the troops. We're getting ready to kind of lose our mind on the guys. And they said the coaching staff as coaches, they kind of looked down the bench, and they were looking at each other, and they were looking at the players, and they saw unbelievable body language, shoulders up, chins up, unbelievable positive talk between the guys. Hey, no problem. We still got 55 minutes left in the game. We'll get this. We'll get it. No big deal. And so those guys, that's an uncomfortable situation. And the way that they treated each other in that situation was incredible. They went on to win that game, and they went on to get to the national championship game that year where they lost to North Dakota in the finals. So just incredible story, a hockey story about coming together. And then the one thing that I like to talk about is everybody eats ramen. I listen to this podcast. It's called How I Built This. And this guy, he basically interviews these Fortune 500 CEOs on their journey of how they built their companies. And this one person was talking, and he's talking about how he was living in New York City and he was broke and he had to eat ramen noodles every night because he had just failed another business. And so the interviewer stops him right there and he goes, I just got to stop you. Do you know you were the third multi-billionaire in a row that I have interviewed that has told me that they have been broke because they just failed a business and had to eat ramen noodles for dinner every night because that's all they can afford? It just goes to show you, it's not necessarily the people with the most talent. Yeah, talent's important. It's not necessarily the people with the best ideas. Yeah, ideas are important. But it's the people who have the fortitude to get back up on the horse when they get pushed down. Those are the biggest qualities of people that end up making it in whatever industry it is. And making it, again, it's a relative term. You can't see me right now. I'm putting it in, air quotations. But if you want to get to special places, you got to be special when it comes to adversity and resiliency. And then I have a video here to top it all off. And you guys being from Chicago, you'll appreciate it.
Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I led you to believe it was easy when it wasn't. Maybe I made you think my highlights started at the free throw line and not in the gym. Maybe I made you think that every shot I took was a game winner. That my game was built on flash and not fire. Maybe it's my fault that you didn't see that failure gave me strength, that my pain was my motivation. Maybe I led you to believe that basketball was a God-given gift and not something I worked for every single day of my life. Maybe I destroyed the game. Or maybe you're just making excuses.
So I absolutely love that commercial. And again, I'm sure 99% of the people on this right now are watching The Last Dance. I can't believe it's actually going to be over tomorrow. My wife thinks I'm legitimately insane because I sit there, like I get to my couch 2 hours beforehand just to make sure I'm mentally ready to watch those things because they're amazing. But you all know Michael Jordan's story and how it wasn't easy for him, and you see how hard he pushed himself and he pushed others, and it wasn't an easy ride for him, to say the least. But that's why he's great, and that's why I love that commercial. So moving on, relationships. This is a big one. Show me your circle and I will show you your future. So I would imagine there's a lot of kids listening to this right now, a lot of teenage kids specifically. And, what I like to do when I talk to kids of your guys' age is I say, hey, look, put me in a room with your 5 best friends and I'll tell you with 100% certainty if you're going to make it or not. And I wholly believe that. Put me in the room with your 5 best friends, the people who have the most influence on you, and I'll tell you if you're going to make it or not. That's how much I think relationships are important. And as I go through this, I'll show you why. All right. So I have here 2 hockey database accounts. These are 2 of my really good friends. So this guy on the left here is a teammate of mine at Cornell. His first-round draft pick to the Washington Capitals. Played 2 years at Cornell, signed a max rookie deal, went on to play pro hockey after that. Guy on the right, another really good friend of mine, very similar situation. He played in the USHL, played 2 years at the University of Denver, signed a max rookie deal, was a second-round draft pick after his second year at Denver to go and play in the NHL. But then you look after their college careers and you look at where they went, right? Guy on the left, 0 NHL games. Guy on the right, still playing in the NHL. Played in the Olympics, has played in all-star games, you name it. Just an incredible player. So I told you these guys are two really good friends of mine. The only thing that's different between their situations, again, you talk about both first, second round draft picks, high round draft picks, both signed max rookie deals after their sophomore years of college. The guy on the left chose to surround himself with the wrong people. Didn't really care about his teammates at Cornell anymore. He was more worried about the bars and the parties and the stuff that he would buy with his signing bonus, all that kind of stuff. That's what he got into. The guy on the right, if you don't know who he is yet, the guy on the right's Paul Stasny. Stas is the best friend of Jeff Lavecchio, who's my co-host on the podcast. We've actually had Stas on the podcast to talk about his journey. You know, Stas's dad, Peter Stas, was an NHL legend, and basically, you know, had to almost dodge gunfire to escape from communist Czechoslovakia to get over here and play. You don't think he imparted how to be humble and his humble beginnings to his kids? You know, Paul has a brother that played in the NHL, Jan. Just an incredible family. And, you know, the year that he signed with Colorado, he actually still lived in the dorms at the University of Denver with the guys that he won a national championship with the years before. So, you know, again, you look at these two players, very similar situations, all the talent in the world, high round draft picks, 2 years at school, all that kind of stuff. The guy on the left chose to surround himself with the wrong people. The guy on the right chose to surround himself with the right people. And you look it up, it's about an $80 million difference in those two decisions that they made. So how do you build relationships? Again, this is something, you know, it doesn't just happen. Relationships take time, they take effort. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of married couples on here for the kids. You know, there's married couples here too. You know, it's not easy. Relationships sometimes are hard, and relationships sometimes are uncomfortable. But those uncomfortable situations are, you know, they're really important in your growth and development as a kid. So I talk to kids at this age, you know, I think there's some midget hockey players on here, maybe some bantam hockey players on here. The most uncomfortable situation that you guys are going to be put in, and maybe you've already been put in, is to say no. Saying no is a really powerful thing, and it's a really hard thing at your guys' age, because you look at it, it's really hard to tell your best friends no. But I can guarantee you that some of your best friends are going to get into stuff that if you want to get to where you want to go and you have hopes and dreams, that's stuff you can't get into. And so getting comfortable in those uncomfortable situations, that's a huge thing. You know, from a teammate standpoint, when you talk about as an organization, as a program, as a group, you know, one of the toughest things to do is to hold your teammates accountable. One of the biggest things that I talk about when I talk about with the college teams is the meeting after the meeting. And I was fortunate enough once to hear Mike Babcock talk, and he talked about, I can go in and I can give the best speech to my team in the locker room, drop the best X's and O's, and you know, think I'm a great coach. But at the end of the day, that meeting, it doesn't really matter. The meeting that matters is the meeting that happens once those guys are away from the rink and they're talking about that meeting. And if those guys don't have a buy-in to that meeting, I'm screwed as a coach. If those guys aren't buying into what I'm selling and they're not buying in to doing it together as a team, doesn't matter what I drop as an X's and O's standpoint. It's not going to happen. So those are some uncomfortable situations. So you sit there, and for the parents that are in here, you know, the car ride home. What are you putting your kids in uncomfortable situations where they're not going to enjoy the game too? That's a really big thing to talk about with parents, is how you're talking to your kids after games, whether they're playing good or whether they're playing bad. So get comfortable being in uncomfortable situations. It's okay to say no. If you want to get to great places, it's okay to say no for kids from your age. And then you move down scientific benefits to helping others. You know, I'm a big believer in blocking shots, and I'm a bigger believer that when you block shots, if your bench doesn't go crazy, then you lost all the momentum of whatever shot that was blocked. And so, you know, when you block a shot and you go back to your bench and the team is like all excited and awesome, that's an incredible feeling for any player to have, you know. And why is that? Well, blocking shots, that's not something you do for yourself. Nobody likes blocking shots. Nobody likes taking hits to make plays. You know, those are sacrifice things to help the team win. And when you do those things, that's helping your team, not necessarily helping yourself. And the research and the science that goes into helping others, you get a lot of benefits from a neurological and from a psychological and from a a nervous system standpoint when you do things for others. So, you know, when you're playing in a game, and you guys can see it, I'm sure you in your games that you've played. I talk about this with the college teams all the time. If the other team blocks a shot and their bench goes nuts, what happens to your bench? Usually the body language goes, oh crap, those guys they're in it. They're playing for each other, and it's a huge psychological advantage. So when you do things for others, that's an incredible thing. And then being a part of something that's greater than yourself. If you can get it in your heads as a kid, that you're playing for each other, you're playing for the organization, you're playing for the thing on the front of your jersey, not on the back, and you can connect as a group with that, that's what championship teams are made of. Every single championship team that's ever happened has had that in everybody that I've spoken to about winning championships, and I've spoken to a lot of people about it. It's that buy-in, it's that togetherness, and this is a big one for me. What you see on the surface isn't always what you get. And a lot of times, somebody can walk into the rink and, maybe they're in a bad mood, or maybe they're quiet or something like that. So maybe you just stay away from that person. But usually there's something going on down at the bottom here that leads to why we act the way that we do. And the best teams find a way to get to here. They find a way to get to know each other, to see what's on the bottom of that iceberg. So now, rather than staying away from somebody when they come to the rink, when maybe it looks like they're having a bad day, being a good teammate and having relationships is going up to that person and say, hey, how can I help? Looks like you're down today. That's what championship teams do. That's what leaders do. They have a unique ability to really invest the time and effort in getting to know what's at the bottom here, so they can better act and react to what goes on above the surface. Okay, so if there's any questions, I'm going to check the chat here. It doesn't look like there's any questions as of yet. So I'll keep going. The next thing I'm going to talk about is relentless repetition. So we've got a bunch of kids on here listening right now. I bet you if I asked every single one of you guys if you work hard, you're going to raise your hand. And I bet you that if I asked every kid in the United States and Canada and around the world if they work hard, they're probably going to raise their hand, 99% of them. That's the easy thing. It's easy to work hard. If you want to separate yourselves, you got to do some things differently. And we'll talk about what that means here. But before that, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story. And this is a really unique story. So for those of you that don't know who this is, it's Joe Pavelski. Joe Pavelski, he's going to go down as probably one of the top 20 American-born hockey players of all time. And I was fortunate enough my last year playing junior hockey in Chicago to make the USHL All-Star team. So the All-Star game was in Lincoln, and they make this whole big thing out of it. They do press conferences, they do pregame skates, and it's one of those things where all the NHL scouts, all the college scouts go to kind of watch the game, and they make this whole big thing out of it. And I'll never forget, we do our pregame skate, and Joe was actually on my line that night, and I was sitting next to him in the locker room. And so it was incredible. So I go in after the pregame skate the morning before the game, and I'm getting my stuff off, and Joe's sitting next to me in the locker room, but Joe's not in there. And so I keep getting undressed, and 5-10 minutes go by, and Joe's still not in the locker room. So I just kind of get curious, and I walk back out to the ice, and who's the only guy on the ice when everybody else is off? It's Joe Pavelski. And what's he doing? He's working on his skating. So Joe Pavelski was a 9th-round draft pick. They don't even have 9 rounds anymore. I think he was 205th overall. And he's going to go down as one of the top 20 American-born hockey players of all time. And the reason why that he is where he is because he was the only guy on that ice when all of us were thinking we were all-stars and enjoying the lights and the glam of all the stuff that was going on that weekend. He was still on the ice working on his game. But there's another part to the story that I think is even more valuable. And that's when I went out to go see what he was doing, I had 2 other kids come up right behind me. And they saw Joe on the ice working on his stuff. And I'll never forget, because what were they saying? What were they calling Joe Pavelski at the time? Frickin' Johnny Go Hard. Way to go, buddy. Johnny Go Hard. Trying to, show everybody up. Yada, 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 yada. Well, you know what? Joe Pavelski went on to be one of the top 20 American-born players of all time. And those 2 guys never amounted to anything. And so it just goes to show you, when you have that work ethic and you have that desire and that passion to get better, a lot of times there are people around you that are going to try and take you down. And why is that? Because everybody wants to be the hardest worker, but not everybody has the desire and the actual go-getitiveness to actually do it. And so rather than elevate their work ethic, what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and bring you back down to theirs by making fun of you, by calling you Johnny Try Hard, all that kind of stuff. don't listen to those people. They're everywhere. That it's very, very hard to be great. And the reason why it's very, very hard to be great is because it takes a lot of work. So that story is an incredible story that I always like to tell people, especially younger kids that have dreams of doing some pretty cool things. So how do you do it? Okay. We're going to talk about an action plan. We're going to talk about an accountability, and we're going to talk about being conscientious. But another story that I want to talk to you guys about is Matt Molson. So Matt Molson has made a lot of money playing in the NHL, scored 30 goals 3 years in a row playing on Johnny Tavares' line. And I was lucky enough, my freshman year at Cornell, Mols was a junior, and Mols was captain. He was an All-American. He was the leading scorer from the team from the year before. And I'll never forget that first night that I was there. And Matt Molson comes up to me. He goes, "Toph, meet me at the football field at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." And I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Yeah, meet me at the football field at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." Granted, this is the first night you're on campus. Everybody's having a good time. We're at the hockey house, all that kind of stuff. Because meet me at the football field 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I was like, "Oh, man, okay. I'll go get the other freshmen. We'll meet you there." He's like, No. Just me and you and I, football field tomorrow morning." So I was like, okay. So, get home that night pretty late, wake up early and go to the football field the next morning. And Mols ran me through the hardest workout that I've ever been in my entire life. And you guys can't see me right now, but I'm a 5'4" hockey player that had to be the hardest worker to get to where I got to. I had to be. And so coming in, I thought I was the hardest worker. And then I understood after Mols put me through that workout that I wasn't even close to where I needed to be. So I think about a couple things. Number one, Matt Molson, first of all, what a leader. He didn't have to do that. And I would have taken a bullet for Matt Molson after that day for taking me under my wing and showing me the ropes of what it meant to be a Cornell hockey player. And the second thing is I knew what it took now. There is somebody that is working harder than you out there. I can guarantee it. In business, in life, in hockey, whatever it is that you aspire to, there are people that are working harder than you out there. So if you're a competitive person, take that as a challenge to do the best that you can and work as hard as you can to try and meet those people that you're competing with to get to wherever you want to go. And Mols, that was a great lesson for me that, there are people out there, but if you do it with each other, that's a big thing. So when we talk about it, when you want to have that relentless repetition, you want to work harder and smarter than people. Number one is have a plan. Have a plan and write it down. The research and the studies will show you that if you show up somewhere and you say, "What am I going to do today?" you're not going to get it done. The people who are productive, the people who are successful and get to where they want to do, they have a plan, they write it down, and they check it off. So our guys at Cornell, they had something in their locker every day that they were going to do, and they were going to put that little checkbox on there. So they made sure that they were able to do it. They had a plan. Number two, have an accountability buddy. A little bit of positive peer pressure is a great thing. Matt Molson, that's why he always brought people along when he was doing things on his own, whether it was a jump rope thing, because Matt had to work on his foot speed. He would bring somebody that needed to work on their foot speed to be able to do that. Whether it was his shot, he would get somebody to work on his shot with him. He always had somebody with him to do it. So whether it's shooting pucks, whether it's push-ups, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be somebody in your house. It could be a teammate, somebody you text everybody every night. "Hey, I did my thing that I said I was going to do." It's a powerful, powerful thing. And then being conscientious about it. You're never going to see the results right away. When you're working hard, you talk about developing habits. Those are things that are developed over long periods of time. So don't be discouraged if you want to have a better shot and you shoot 100 pucks for a week, but your shot's not better yet. Don't be discouraged. It doesn't work that way. It takes about a month. It takes more than that for you to see results on a lot of the things that you work on. So don't get discouraged. And then I have another video here that I love, another basketball video. I want to show you guys. Bring it home. Several years ago, I had the great honor of working the first ever Kobe Bryant Nike Skills Academy. Nike invited the top 20 high school shooting guards and the top 10 college shooting guards in the country to this camp with Kobe. And it's kind of funny now that I look back on it, how many of those players are now household names in the NBA. However, at that time, the least recognized player there was Stephen Curry. But I knew immediately that he was the most impressive and that thinking long-term, he was going to be a future NBA superstar. And here's how I knew that. It was all because of his work habits.
Now, those skills academies, we would have 2 workouts a day for 3 straight days. 30 minutes before every single workout, most players were still in their flip-flops and had on their headphones. And Stephen Curry had already started doing some form shooting. He had already started taking game shots from game spots and games. By the time the workout officially started, he had probably already made 100, 150 shots and was in a full sweat. When the workout actually started, he was meticulous with everything that he did. He made sure that he had perfect footwork. He made sure that he had perfect shooting form. If he did anything and it wasn't perfect, he did it over again. And he didn't need a coach to tell him, he just did. And then probably the most impressive thing that he did was as soon as every workout was over, he would not leave the court until he swished 5 free throws in a row. You know how hard that is? But that's the level of excellence that he holds himself to. And the moral of that story is that success is not an accident. Success is actually a choice. And Stephen Curry is one of the best shooters on the planet today because he has made the choice to create great habits. And my question to you is, are the habits that you have today on par with the dreams that you have for tomorrow? That's something that you need to ask yourself every single day. Because whatever you do on a regular basis today will determine where you will be tomorrow.
Curry got the 3 off. Tie game!
I love that video so much. I don't know if it's because I'm small and I like when small guys do well, but it's a fantastic video. And the two quotes that I took out of there that I think are the most impactful: success is not an accident. Success is a choice. And it's not just a choice. It's a series of choices that you make every day to create great habits. And then are the habits you have today on par with the dreams that you have for tomorrow? It's easy to have a dream. Everybody has a dream. It's extremely hard to put the work in every day to create the habits to be able to realize that dream. And so, you look at Steph Curry, you look at Michael Jordan, you look at even guys like, Tom Brady, you look at guys, even Sidney Crosby. You talk about the adversity side of it and how hard they need to work. Sidney Crosby, who is arguably the best hockey player of our generation, he had to sit in a dark room for 1.5 years with concussion issues, and he had to work his way to get back and reteach himself a lot of different things. And he went on to win an Olympic gold medal and Stanley Cups and MVPs and all that kind of stuff. And you talk to any of his teammates, you talk to anybody that knows him, it's these things on the screen right now that have allowed him with his talent to get to where he is. And so that relentless repetition, working harder and smarter, is a really, really powerful thing. The next thing to talk about is relishing the moment. Don't stress over the past. It's gone. Don't worry about the future. It hasn't arrived, and live in the present. Make it your masterpiece. I will admit, even from personal experience, that is much more easier said than done. Much easier said than done. But at the same time, you look at a lot of the research being done nowadays. You look at the research of the studies of successful people, happy people, fulfilled people. They're able to put the time in the present and focus on the here and now. So I love this thing. You can't change the past, but you can ruin the present by worrying about the future. Again, much easier said than done. We'll talk a little bit about it. So how can we do that? Because again, it's a tough thing to do, but it's a very, very important thing to do. The one thing you hear every successful coach that's ever lived in the last decade talk about: the process. You talk about teams even name, their mantra or their motto, the process, teams like Alabama football and stuff like that. If you can learn to trust and enjoy the journey rather than focusing on the end result, the end result will be a lot closer to view than if you just view it as a means to an end. So trust the process, trust your work ethic, trust your character, and all the things that we just talked about, and then learn to enjoy it as well. One of the things, I'll get to it a little bit later in this presentation, but when I go and talk to, especially the colleges, I ask them, I say, hey guys or girls, why do you play hockey? Tell me why. Why do you play the game? And I said, well, I love it. It's fun. It makes me happy to play, and then I ask them, okay, when you get to the rink for practice or for games or whatever it may be, how often are you thinking about that? How often are you thinking about, man, I get to go to the rink today and enjoy this because it's what I love to do? and maybe 1 out of 30 people raises their hand. It's one of those things we're always worried about the end result. We're always worrying about things that we can't control. The coach's attitude, what practice is going to be like, how am I going to play, how am I going to practice, all that kind of stuff. We forget that we play the game because we love to play the game. If you can trust and enjoy the journey of it, I think you'll see that the end result is a lot closer to near. Number 2, mindfulness. Every study and every research anecdote talks about how taking some time out of your day to, whether it's meditate or just put your phone away, just to kind of be alone with yourself and be mindful. It's an incredible thing for your health and well-being, and can 100% lead to better performance on the ice as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about is enjoying versus searching. And we live in this age, especially for you guys as kids, it's a social media age. And I thank God every night before I go to bed that I didn't have to grow up in this age that you guys are growing up in, because I am somebody that very much cares about what other people think. It's one of my biggest weaknesses. And this social media age, it forces us as people to really care about what other people think about us, and to portray this image on social media of perfection, when at the end of the day, perfection is not attainable. So what social media does, and I'll give you a perfect example. I got a 3-year-old daughter and I got a 9-month-old daughter. Okay, so for the parents that are listening and watching this right now, you'll get where I'm coming from here. So I'll have my 3-year-old and my 9-year-old on a couch, and I want to take a picture of them. And it probably takes about 2 minutes to be able to take a picture of them, because they're 3 years old and 9 months old, right? So for 1:59 of that 2 minutes, my daughters are psychos. They want to hold the phone, or they want to, they don't want to sit still, or, all this different kind of stuff. But for that 1 second, they sit next to each other and they smile. And I take that picture and they're smiling and they look like the angels that they quote unquote are. So what do I put up on social media? Do I put on the 1:59 of real life where it was a complete disaster and they were crying and wanted to hold the phone and all that kind of stuff? Absolutely not. I put up that 1 second of that 2 minutes where they look like perfect little angels. And then what happens? I put it up on social media and everybody tells me how well behaved and how cute my 2 little daughters are. When in real life, that was 1 second out of the 2 minutes, out of the 120 seconds. And that's what we do. That's what we do on social media. We put up the best version of ourselves for people to see. And what happens when we do that is we look up because everybody else is doing the same thing. So we see all these people that it looks like they're having all this fun, or they committed to this team or that team, or they made this team or that team, or they're scoring all these, whatever it may be. And we're sitting here with all the struggles that we have, because that's real life. And we think, well, nobody else is struggling. Why am I struggling? So we're searching for all these things, and we're looking at all these things that is not real life. And that doesn't make us feel very good about ourselves. At the end of the day, everybody has struggles. At the end of the day, if we can learn to enjoy the good and the bad and the ugly of our lives, instead of searching for something that other people have and wishing that we had these things that other people quote unquote have, because that's what they put on social media, our health and well-being and our productivity and everything that we do, I think you'll see a much bigger jump in your happiness, your productivity, and everything that we had just talked about. I'll check if there's any questions here too. Doesn't look like anything in the chat yet here. So the last thing I'm going to talk about here is reflection. And this is, for me, one of the biggest things that is, again, you talk about the social media revolution. We have so many different things and so much information at our fingertips that we forget to take time out of our day to think about what's important to us. And another piece of that is, I have the quote, everything that happens in your life is a reflection of what you believe about yourself, not what others think about you. So I ask the kids, when I'm doing my team building, what's more important? Is it the stuff that happens to you, or is it the way that you choose to think about yourself in what happens to you? And they all say, they kind of like, they look and they're like, yeah, it's definitely the way that I react and the way I choose to think about what happens to me. But, we don't think about that nearly enough, in my opinion. Tony Robbins, big motivational speaker. His line right here, most people fail in life because they major in minor things. There's so many things outside of our control that are minor things that eat up and cause us to be anxious and very stressed. The major things in our life, the things that we, in my opinion, are the things that we can control. That's our work ethic. That's our attitude. That's the way we choose to see the world, not the way that the world chooses to see us. But a lot of the times we get caught up in these little minor things, disagreements that we have with people, you talk about a hockey standpoint, a bad shift in a game, or maybe even a bad game or a bad couple of games. In the grand scheme of things, those things are we live long lives. They're not really that important, but the major things, like the things that we can control, how we treat each other, how we treat our families and our friends, the attitude that we choose to bring to our relationships, the way we choose to think about what we do, those are the major things in life that if we chose to think about more, I think you'll see that we'll be more productive as individuals, as teams, and we'll enjoy the hell out of it a lot more. So what are ways that we can choose to reflect? Number one is a gratitude journal. Gratitude is one of those things. Again, this is a Tony Robbins saying, it's impossible to be grateful and fearful at the same time. Being fearful is what makes cowards of us all. Fear is the hardest thing to overcome. Fear of judgment of others, fear of making mistakes, fear of being vulnerable and putting yourself out there and giving everything you have to a situation. That's what makes us not succeed. And that's what makes us stressed and anxious. But at the end of the day, if you're grateful for the things that you have and you can choose to every day think about those things, maybe even write it down, I think you'll see your health and well-being and your productivity, like we said too, those things can really elevate. Do things that give you perspective. Perspective, in my opinion, if you listen to Jeff and I's podcast, it's something we talk about typically every podcast, or at least every other podcast that we do. And that's the way that you choose to see the world from a 10,000 foot view. And, we get so caught up in ourselves, and we get so caught up in the day to day that we lose perspective a lot of the times. And one of the things that I do, I say I'm fortunate, but I have two brothers that have special needs, and their lives are hard. They're very, very hard, and they go through some tough stuff. And there's a lot of times when I go through my life and there's things that are happening that are tough, and, things aren't going my way or whatever it may be. A lot of times I'll think about my brothers, and I'll talk to my brothers and really kind of understand that I'm very, very grateful and very, very lucky to what I have in my life. And I would imagine that if everybody on this call took some time to really think about it, they would be very, very happy with the situations and what they have in their lives as well. For me and my brothers, I think about the fact that, I'm able to have a wife and kids, and I don't know if that's something they're ever going to be able to have. I'm able to have a job and put food on the table and a roof over my head and my family's head. And that's not something that I know if they're ever going to have. And so again, it goes back to it. I got a lot of things to be grateful for. But that's something that I think it's important to really choose to think about. And then for the kids especially, but adults too, shut off the devices every day. Take some time out of your day to put the phone away, shut it off, and really just try to be with yourself or be with the people that you love and really connect. Connection is one of the most powerful things that we can have in this world. And we're much better able to do that when we shut the devices off. So parents, I'm probably giving you some props here for your next dinner conversation or next time you're hanging out with your kids. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about just very briefly to end this off is responsibility. It's kind of like the hidden sixth R of this presentation. It's the decisions that you make, not the conditions that you're given, that determine your destiny. Again, goes back to it. What's more important, the things that happen to you or the way that you choose to act and think about the things that happen to you? And if you really want to truly do something special, it's up to you. You might be put in favorable situations. You might be put in unfavorable situations. But if you want it bad enough, you learn that failure is a good thing. You'll learn to value the relationships with the people that you have and all the stuff that we talked about in this presentation. That's up to you. That's your responsibility. I'm going to end this with a quote here, or a poem. That's my favorite quote, or not quote, my favorite poem in the world. And I read this at the end of every single one of my presentations. It's called The Man in the Glass. And it goes like this: when you get what you want in your struggle for self and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass, The fellow whose verdict counts most in your life is that one staring back from the glass. Some people may think you're a straight shooting chum and call you a wonderful guy, but the guy in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. He's the fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear up to the end, and you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if that man in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of life and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated that man in the glass. And so I absolutely love that poem because I'm a big believer that your destiny is in your control. And there's going to be things that are going to be thrown at you, and there's things that are out of your control that will test that. But if you can look in the glass and like what you see, I go back to it. I've talked about success a lot in this, and to me and Jeff and I talk about this on our podcast all the time. Success is a relative thing, and I think the best definition I've ever heard of success is the person from a sports standpoint that's probably the most successful person ever in sports, and that's John Wooden. John Wooden won 10 national championships in 12 years as the head basketball coach of UCLA. And the way that he defined success is peace of mind. Success is peace of mind that if you can go to bed every night and you can like the person that is going to bed and know that you have done your best to improve yourself and to treat others well, that's true success. It's not the end result. And that's coming from the guy that's had the best end results of anybody in sports history. So I encourage you to take the bull by the horns. If you want to do something great, you talk about the 5 R's. If you can really, really value those 5 R's, resiliency, your relationships, that repetition, that relishing in being in the moment, and then finally taking some time out of your day to reflect upon the why of what you do. That's what successful people do. That's what successful organizations do. And I would encourage you to do that as well. So that is the presentation, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Looks like we got a question here in the chat, and I'm going to stop my my share here. And if you guys have some questions, we can talk about it. So appreciate it. First question I have, looks like this is from Gabe. From a parent's perspective, what should parents talk about on the car ride home to help their hockey player? It's a fantastic question. And for me, I look back and I think about my dad and my mom when I would have those conversations. And it's actually something, if you listen to our podcast, every high level hockey player that we've had on, we've asked that question to. And there's a couple things that I think are important. Number one is let them talk first. If they want to talk about it, they'll talk about it. And then you can talk about it as much as you want. So I think letting your kid kind of initiate the conversation, I think, is one thing that's really good. And then the second thing is when you're talking about hockey and you're talking about the game, don't talk about execution. Talk about effort and enjoyment. Execution, it's very, very easy to sit up in the stands and critique people. I know that because I did it for a living for 6 years as a college recruiter. That was my job, was to critique people's performance. But then you think about back as a player and you think about, oh, he should have done this or should have done that or should have done this. Well, there's 5 guys on the other team that are trying to stop him from doing what he's trying to do. And it's a lot harder on the ice in the heat of the moment than it is watching it up in the stands or watching it on video. So I think absolutely. My parents, if I was ever not working hard, or if I had bad body language or anything like that, and they told me about it, I think that was a good thing. But don't talk to them about, you should have made this play or you should have made that play, or did you see this person, or any of that kind of stuff. I think the best thing you can do as a parent is say, you know what, I enjoyed watching you work hard today. I really had fun watching you work hard and enjoy the game. I think that is the best thing that you can do as a parent. We had John Butchergross on our podcast for our 100th episode, and that was what he said. He had a son that played, and he's like, you know what, I always made a point to tell my kid how much I love to watch him play. And I think that's a big thing on the car ride home. So if there's any other questions, I guess you can maybe even unmute yourself and ask it, or you can put it in the chat. Or if the coaches have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have too. Kent has one. How much importance did you put on body language when you were recruiting at Cornell? 10 out of 10. You talk to anybody, You know, you have somebody who pouts on the bench, or you have somebody that yells at their teammates, or you have somebody that throws their head up or throws their stick when they make mistakes. I ain't recruiting you. It's not worth it. In my opinion, you can't fix that. And to fix that, it takes a lot of work to fix that. I'd rather have kids in my program, my organization, that I don't have to fix that. I would rather fix the people when it's from like a skill standpoint, because it's much more fun to teach skill than it is to teach, you know, that stupid stuff. And it gets on my nerves when I have to, you know, get on people's cases for being a bad teammate or bad body language. And at the end of the day, like, you win with people. You don't win with talent. You have to have talent, but every championship that's ever won, they've done it because people loved each other in the locker room. And you can't have people that you love in the locker room when you have to deal with that kind of stuff. So it's a huge thing for me. It's a huge thing I would encourage you, if there's kids that want to play college hockey, on here. I just did a YouTube conversation with 3 of my friends in the business, who I think are the 3 of the best recruiters in the game. Ben Sire, who I worked with at Cornell, Steve Miller, who's at Ohio State, and Todd Connaught, who's at Minnesota State Mankato. And we talked about all of this stuff, recruiting character, body language, what are you looking for, all that stuff. And Steve Miller, who built actually the teams that Paul Stastny was on that won national championships in Denver, he basically talked about, like, if you have bad body language on the ice, or if I don't like talking to you when I come down after a game and talk to you, I'm not going to recruit you. I can't fix that. So, and you know, that stuff is really, really important. That's a long-winded answer to your question, Ken, but I think it's really important. That's why I'm giving you a long-winded answer. But the short answer is very much so. It's very important. Any other questions, guys?
Topher, I thought, I mean, this was an outstanding presentation. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks.
I mean, it really hit home to probably as a parent and a coach, but also we have a lot of players on the call. So it was just something that I think we're going to use with our future teams to show them this and have them really think about it. I mean, culture is really important to our club, something we're constantly working on. And this, you hit on and touched on so many points. This was outstanding. It really enjoyable to listen to you present this and just so many outstanding points you made.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mike, do you have anything you wanna add?
Yeah, I can kind of jump off that a little bit. I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of kids and even parents have when we have these different presenters come on and kind of talk to everyone is to kind of look at their message and say, yeah, but how can I help my kid get to the next level, and kind of brush past all of the different points that everybody is saying. These are the things day in and day out you have to do in order to have the opportunity to get to the next level. But everybody's in such a rush, and it's part of what Topher said in his presentation is be in the now. Like, understand what it takes to do today, and then worry about tomorrow when you get to tomorrow. But all of a sudden, always thinking about how do I get to that next level, and not taking care of business right now is going to cost you from ever getting the opportunity to get to the next level. So hopefully within a lot of the things that not only Topher said today, but the other presenters have said, you guys are taking that and then applying it now, and not always thinking about, you know, the end game or the end result, like Topher was saying today. And then the other thing, just to, you know, kind of plug his podcast, if anybody listens to it, or if they don't, they definitely should. And I think the name of it as the Hockey Think Tank is so perfect, because Topher will have people with different opinions and ideas on either how the game should be played or things within the game that they're doing. And I think it's so easy for any of us to have somebody that has a difference of opinion to just shut their idea down. And Topher and Jeff both do a really nice job of listening to what that person has to say, getting an understanding of why they think and feel that way, and they have a real honest discussion. And me as a coach and as a scout, I actually get things out of each podcast, even if it's 1 or 2 things. But I think as a kid and as a parent, if you guys follow that or listen to it, you're going to get a better view of what the people at the highest levels are saying and doing, and you know, what they're looking for in players too. So, you know, Topher, you do a really nice job on your podcast, and I think you did a really good job talking to us today.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, if there's, Topher, if you could send me some information that I could pass out to the parents about your podcast and how to register or sign up, I'm sure that I'm going to start to get emails and everything. But or if you just can tell them, for those who want more information about it, how they could get it, that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll send you an email, but it's the Hockey Think Tank podcast. We have a website, thehockeythinktank.com. We have another website too, with a lot more kind of like detailed information, which is access.thehockeythinktank.com. We actually just started a YouTube page as well. So we've got a bunch of different YouTube videos that we have up there. Yeah, we're just trying to do what we can and put as much hockey development, education, passion, content up, and it's been fun. So Vinny Barra, who some of you guys might know, has been a really big help for me and doing a lot of this stuff. I know he's a Jets coach too, so he's the brains. I'm just the hockey guy. So, I'll shoot you an email if anybody has an email too. My email is topher@thehockeythinktank.com. If you have other questions, just reach out and be able to help.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your time today, Topher. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care.